Welcome to this webinar about electric scooters. I was actually joking just before we started this session, we were talking about electric scooters. But of course, now we're talking about a serious subject. Portfolio management, financial control, budgeting, things like that. So the money thing, right? We've discussed many topics by now with the three of us, but now we're going to talk money. But why would we, let's start with the first thing, like why in Agile, like, you know, we're very enlightened and we don't need leadership anymore and money is not important anymore. Why would we care at all? Like why would we care about budgeting and finance and stuff like that? Who cares?
Yeah, interesting question, Sergio. I actually looked up on the internet why people need budgeting anyway. And it's, for example, for financial health, or to give structure, or to enable scenario thinking, or to support decision making, those kinds of things. And then, for example, financial health. So every company or every organization wants to be at least healthy on the financial side, meaning you don't want to spend more money than you have, right? Because then you go bankrupt and it's wrong. So in that sense, it's definitely important and a topic to give attention to. But in the Agile world, and we will come to that, we have a little bit different look on that.
But so the money thing is still important in Agile, right?
Absolutely.
It didn't magically go away. Just a point of order for those of you watching, I have the chat open here, so any questions that are coming by, we always try to answer every question that there comes by. So if it's there and I see it has a relationship to the topic, sometimes I might not come to your answer a question immediately, because there is of course a bit of a structure to the talk that we want to do. But I'll keep an eye on it. So everything you want to ask, put it in the chat. So let's go indeed to the first real topic. Apart from that, okay, money is still a thing, finance is still a thing, budgeting is still a thing. So it's important. So the first thing, of course, we'd like to talk about is the fact that, yes, financial budgeting things are different, but there are some fundamental shifts and switches that were in Agile. Normally, you could say classic project, there is more you know what you're going to do, and then you have burn rates, and you talk about costs and keeping cost in control. And in Agile, that's kind of flipped around.
Yes.
So I'd like both of you to speak to that. What's the flip here? What's going on here? What's different?
You first?
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing is that I've done a lot of project management in the past, and usually if we started to set up a project and think about we are going to develop a new product, it was always about how much do we need to invest, what are we going to make for it, what is the business case, how much money are we going to generate with this. And then if all the figures were right, we said let's go build it. And then for 1.5 years nobody was really looking anymore to those figures until you get close to the moment to put that product on the market, and all of a sudden it was like, we invested a lot of money. Within Agile, you are still developing a product, so that is why the investment, the budgeting is important. But the difference is, are we building something that is valuable for the customer? And that is what I see the differences in what we are doing compared to when we were just running projects, because then the investment was how much is the benefit for the company. Yeah, and now it's but how much is the benefit for the customer? And that is a different thing. And this is also the reason why you need to have a different view on your investments, on your budgets, and that is where the Agile approach does not always feel comfortable for a lot of people who are used to this traditional way of budgeting in an organization.
Yeah, and adding to that, on the purely practical side, so as Robert said, we were used to thinking about, okay, this is the scope in project management sense. This is the thing we are going to build, and then we have to think about how are we going to build it. Then we have to figure out, okay, if we are going to do it this way, that means it will cost so much investment. Yeah. That sounds reasonable for the benefits that we expect, so let's go to do the project, and then don't look at the numbers anymore, do a project for a very long time, etc. So one of the things I always say is that in Agile you decouple scope from budget.
Yeah.
So you have budget, you have people doing stuff. You know that they are going to do something. What exactly you don't know. You don't know the scope up front. But the people are there, so you can budget them. You can even fix that. And then, as the moment arrives, you are going to work in iterations, or in short iterations. And every iteration you decide again, is this the most sensible, most valuable thing to do with the people that we already have budgeted?
Yeah.
So the budgeting comes first and then the scope comes later. So I think that's very interesting. And then, of course, because you're working iteratively, you have control over, okay, are we doing the most sensible, the most interesting, the most valuable stuff?
Yeah. So I'd like to call that out explicitly again. So what we're really talking about here is the fact that usually it was the cost side that was variable. It was the thing that needed to be managed.
Yeah.
And in Agile, because we go from that core principle or the core axiom of wanting stable teams, dedicated teams, the cost structure becomes fixed. And I think that's an important lesson to kind of really emphasize. If we're talking about financial control, if we're talking about budgeting, in Agile, the cost side is sort of boring, right? We've chosen to have 10 teams for the coming year. You know what your cost structure is. Yeah. So this is something to get used to, and this is the big shift, and also that I've currently seen myself seen with controllers. Instead of like really having to worry about the cost side, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's just a completely fixed thing. And now we have to switch like fully to like benefits management.
Yeah.
And expressing the variable stuff, and is it any useful? It wasn't like we're burning too much. No, you're burning at the exact rate you chose.
Yeah.
Right, and then it comes down to benefits management. It comes down to that kind of stuff. So
actually, and it seems to me it's very practical because people think that you can upscale or downscale fast, but you cannot do that. You can do it maybe on a time scale of a few months. And you can hire people tomorrow, but are these people immediately, useful for the project or the subject that you are working on? No, because they have to talk with people. They have to start. They have to initiate what has to be done there. Maybe it takes a month, maybe even longer. And so upscaling or downscaling on a very short time scale isn't that easy. So it's much easier to fix that up front and say, okay, we think more or less that we need, like, let's say 50 people or 100 people for a large initiative, and then feed that initiative or feed those people with the right smaller iterative initiatives to accomplish your goals. That's what you should do.
So one of the things we see is like in this switch around. Okay, so you have like a fixed capacity, you have a fixed number of people running, and then budgeting becomes how much are you allowed to claim the teams for a while, right? If I took a look at myself and some of the larger clients I had, it was really that the business case meant that people would, business would come in with a business case, management would say, hey, wait a minute, this is worth us so much. You're going to get these teams for 2 months. That's your budget, quote unquote. It was like translated to a time budget for a fixed team. And now they started engaging, and they knew they had 2 months to fix the whole thing. Right, and here you talk about like disconnecting scope from budget, and they knew they had to. That's my allocated time. I have 2 months' time, and then the negotiation between the team and the stakeholders started to really use that budget.
Yeah.
Do you have a similar experience of that? How does that budgeting kind of claiming work at your end?
Yeah, well, what I see is that working within Philips, we are a typical annual budgeting organization. So from a finance perspective, there is still this thought that if you ask for money, you need to provide a solid business case with the benefits.
What exactly do we get for that money?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the challenge that you always have. And I think within portfolio, we try to find a way how we can mitigate that the teams are dedicated to deliver something, and we are able to build a business case around it that for the financial part of the organization is good enough to say, okay, we are confident with given that large amount of budget. So what we do, and that is the change, we are looking at our scope of our e-commerce platform, and we are really identifying areas where we still miss something. We call that portfolio items, and then we are going to have a look at that and say, okay, there are 20 pieces of the puzzle that we want to build.
Yeah.
Which one is a priority? So we are talking with our customer-facing market organizations, what is important for your market and for the customers in your market. And from that, we drill down a few of those items and we say, okay, this is where we are going to work upon this year. How much teams do we need for that? Then you identify how much teams. So for this, we need that much people, for that much people, for that much people, and you can build your business case around that.
And how do you know this, Robert? If you ask people, okay, do you need one team or 100 teams? How do you do that?
Yeah, difficult, and this is a kind of trial and error. It's the same what I always say to what the product owner also does with his team. If they are talking about in the next sprint we are going to build an X amount of user stories, when a team starts up they don't know how much they can do. Exactly. And that is for us the same. And this is where the Agile part is coming in. So you start with a defined amount of people to one initiative that we want to do, but ongoing you might find out that here you have too much people, there you don't have enough people. And are you agile enough as an organization to say, you know what, we move these people there? And this is a challenge that I often see, because somehow in our DNA there is still this, no, they were dedicated for this. Yeah. We need to keep them.
Yeah. One caveat though is that one of the things we've often seen, if you take that principle too far, right, you start shoving people back and forth too much.
Yeah.
Kind of sort of that is like, if you're at the higher level, you do want to be agile as your business, but it's one of those things always you really have to take into account, like what's the people price to pay, like the structure. Yeah. What does it mean to move a team around? Will they actually, still be productive? Things like that. So I also found that, indeed you want to kind of balance that agility with the need for teams to have a sort of dedication, stability, etc. So
I would be strongly inclined to say not move the people, but okay, we need more work to be done on this other initiative. So why don't we bring that initiative to the people that are already on the other side?
Yeah, so it's like the first default. At a large scale, you do see, however, that there's this big levels to restructuring. Like you said, like. One of my larger customers would do this trick once a year.
Yeah, exactly.
To kind of find the balance between.
Exactly.
We've budgeted so many teams for this initiative, so there was like a high-level thematic budgeting, like a pie chart, and then we say once a year, knowing that's going to disrupt our teams, we'll only do this once a year, then shift everything around, and then we'll stick with it. And if there's any price to pay, like you say, okay, let's then. Okay, this is something we'd like that team to do, and just give it to them, knowing like it has to be fiddled in somewhere.
Yeah. You could even do that twice a year, and I don't think it's.
As long as it's an evolution.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it also depends on in which area. It's not like we are going to move people that are specifically have knowledge about like kind of payment system. You cannot move those people to another part. But within that area, you have the option to shift a bit with your teams.
That if you have the what I call the social context.
Exactly.
In Agile, you have the release trains or the tribes. That scale of people, you can move. At least a little bit people around within that social context, because you don't lose the synergy. And,
exactly.
Just by the way, as far as the chat, just let you know, I'm watching it. I'm looking at the questions. Ronald, amazing question. I'm not going to tell the gentleman yet, because I'm pretty sure that question is going to derail us. And I really want to pick it up. I think I'll pick it up somewhere later down the line in the hour, because there's still some stuff I want to discuss.
Allocation?
Yeah, well, no, actually that's the third question. Okay. So that's Ton has that question. So we're going to come to that as well, and actually talk about benefits. But here is I think, based on the subject too that we wanted to discuss, is, and this is also kind of tied into Jacqueline's question, how do you set the priorities, what method do you use? But priority setting, of course, comes down to the second topic we sort of pre-discussed, is the fact that in Agile you have these smaller iterations, you have an iterative nature, which fundamentally changes the way you look at cost, the way you deal with risk, essentially. Because instead of like we discussed yesterday, instead of having a big bag of money, because what iterative means, instead of having a big bag of money and you hand it over, just like you discussed, like we have a project 1.5 years, so the bag of money was handed over, and then it's sort of out of your control again. And of course you have a different risk profile. If you're going to be giving away a big bag of money and that's then out of your control, is a very different situation from in an iterative sense. If you have like your hand, on a water tap, and you can just close it whenever it's needed, because the iterations give you that information. You can reclaim money that you thought you were going to be spending and then change it. So could we talk about that a bit? So what's the iterative nature of it? Well, how does it change cost? And how do you make those choices as far as priorities are concerned with the financial information?
So again, so if we are assuming that we have fixed cost in the sense that we have predetermined, okay, these are the amount of people with the hardware that they need, etc., connected to that. That means that the money for say the money is flowing, and we only have to direct it to the right direction. So we know at this moment that important topic X, improving customer satisfaction on a certain product by changing the look or changing the usability of the product. We expect that will help. It seems very sensible on the small scale. So on the small scale, you still have business case-like discussions. On the small scale, we should direct the money flow on this topic, and then realize that. And it's not a large topic of 1.5 years, but it is a topic, of a few months or even smaller. And then you realize it completely. Therefore, you hope at least to be able to generate revenue of that or other benefits that you want to have. Therefore, enabling almost immediately, very fast, your other initiatives and your other innovative projects that you might want to fund with the money that comes in from the first iteration. So it's small iteration delivers something can immediately be used financially to fund the rest, instead of wait 1.5 years and maybe you get something there.
Yeah, so there's the financial impact of early delivery. Right?
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
But instead of also in terms of like pure risk management, oh my God, I'm going to hand over that big bag of money and being able to reclaim it, right? So like I think also in your case you also mentioned like epics and things like that. So is that also something you've experienced at Philips with, where somehow a huge project, kind of the art of chunking it into smaller pieces with a smaller bit of cost and a smaller benefit. How's the experience been for you?
Well, I have a really good example for this. So we wanted to build a community on our e-commerce platform where specific customers could find relevant information for them, but also had the option to communicate. So that's either react on stuff that we were posting there, so you get a lively community, but we would also have the option, to talk back to them. That was the framework. We identified how much people we would want to set on that initiative. So the budget was there. And then the interesting thing happened. You need to talk, at least we in Philips, we need to talk with our customer-facing marketing organization. Who wants to be the guinea pig? Who wants to be the first one to get this communication platform? So we found North America for that. They were really interested. They said, this is what our customers in North America are missing. We would love to have that. And the interesting thing was, there started a negotiation then again, but then with the market organization about, but what are you going to give to me? And we don't know. We don't know. this communication platform, people can come in and people can react on stuff, and we are able to also to communicate with them, and that made people feel very uncomfortable because our customer-facing marketing organizations, they don't work agile. But you see there that it's really important for a product owner to be able to have specific sizes of things that he's going to develop that you can actually put in the market, a customer can use, and that you can see the benefit from that. And what I have seen is that we did that. So first we started with one part that we could really test, and we asked the market, give us some customers that you know, people from hospitals or whatever. They tested it and they gave us feedback, and you saw that was building confidence. Yeah. And then in the next 3 months we built something else, and 3 months later something else.
And thereby related to risk. So the risk that you made stuff that people couldn't use was less because you tested it iteratively. So that's one aspect. Yeah. And another aspect is in Agile you call things that go wrong impediments. The things that slow you down. It's not going the way you thought it would be, and because you're working iteratively, you pick them up. Yeah. You're going to remove those impediments. Yeah. You're going to look at other solutions that do work instead of what you thought before. Yeah. So there are actually, I think, two kinds of risk here involved, and that's can we deliver what actually is needed? So the value part. Okay. The risk of not delivering value. Yeah, that's something that you handle. Yeah. But also the delivery side of things. Can we actually deliver it? Or can we deliver it fast enough? Because you're on the ball. Yeah. You're doing short iterations, so you know very fast whether you are on track or whether you are doing the right thing or whether you are able to do it. Yeah. So fast delivery is also okay. We actually did it. It works. Yeah. Okay, it's very small. It's a minimal viable or whatever, but it works. Yeah.
So that's interesting indeed. So that, in that sense, the iterative method also, and I think if I capture what both of you are also saying, is that what we're not used to normally is if we have business cases or value or things like that, when we express it, we sort of only really look at like the real business case, right?
Yeah,
What's going on there? And that's the thing that needs to be expressed. It's the thing you need to justify, etc. Yeah. Whereas what often doesn't get addressed is delivery risk. Like, can we actually do it? You need to learn it. Yeah. But also, I think that what's interesting, and this made me think as you were saying these things, is that learning value, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the business case behind? So checking hypothesis is basically your story. Yeah. Is that there should be business cases that are sort of geared towards, well, it costs us, say, let's say 50K, which allows us to learn if a business proposition that we want to spend $1 million in, if it will actually work.
Exactly.
Well, this is the difficult thing. So when we are building a business case to get a budget, you are always defining kind of KPIs that you will achieve. It can be customer satisfaction. Can be increase of ratings and reviews. We have brand preference as one, and of course of the obvious ones, sales and those kind of things. But the result you usually see much later, after something is already in the market, because you put something in the market, it needs to be introduced to people. They need to hear it. You need to have a large amount of customers that know it's there, who are going to use it. So that often means that you develop something, you put it in the market, but the benefits that you define in the business case, they might come like a year later. Yeah. So how can you guarantee then during your development and your building that you will achieve that? That is really difficult. So the only thing, in my view, how you can do that is to continuously test, get the customer feedback, if you are on the right track. So in our case with this community, the idea was that we will improve the customer satisfaction because they can communicate, they can find relevant information. By regularly checking, we could see that we were on the good path of our development. And the first time that we released something, we had that tested, we get a lot of feedback like, why do I see that it's not even functioning? And we were like, yeah, but next year that we will have stuff there. But we realized that for them it's a distraction. So we removed it. It was still there, but we put it in the background. Yeah. And this is the feedback that you need, because even if you put an MVP into the market, or it is a third iteration of your MVP, the customer still needs to find it valuable. So everything that is distracting from that value, you need to know. And if you are able to do that, and that is what you say, these impediments, that is really important, you manage that. If you are able to do that, you can be confident that if it's in the market, people will start using it. And if people will start using it, then you can deliver on what you have defined in your business case.
Yeah. So indeed, I think actually Bernadette had this question, so how do you check if you get value for money, right? That's what we're talking about. And I think indeed one of the big takeaways is that iterative method actually allows you to kind of test, check, etc. So funnily enough, we started out with a financial story, and now it turns out that the way we look at value and what we consider value, that actually impacts those financial decisions as well, because it really in terms of like, hey, wait a minute, so we're going to not be spending money just directly building functionality or whatever it may be. We're actually spending money specifically on de-risking and on testing hypotheses. And those are the investments, and by doing it through real actual results, you can kind of reduce the risk. And that will mean that you look differently at risk. I think also the way if I go for personal experience, we once had a project that was like a very large project for a large travel operator, and so people started building it, and so our teams, they were building it first 2 iterations, and then in doing that and delivering those, it was like early days Agile, right? It was internal delivery, it was new for everybody. And immediately that travel operator said, well, wait a minute, this business case actually makes no sense whatsoever. And then they, in the actual experience, they killed the whole project. They just killed it. And everybody was very sad. They said, well, they killed it and we failed and it was very bad. But then we really started thinking about it. It's like, wait a minute. What we actually did is we saved the whole rest of the budget that was we didn't spend it. So another way to put it is what I think, and when I think about finance and Agile, it's also sort of maximizing the money not spent.
Exactly. So and thereby you get value for money. Because you decide iteratively whether you are going to spend the money on the topics that you thought about a year ago. But with the knowledge of today, I have exactly the same example that we had a large project, a traditional project, where there were, let's say, 20 topics that had to be built, and they could be built separately. And the last 7, I think, so 30% or so of the whole project, we looked at it with a completely new product owner. It was actually, he came in and said, okay, you are the product owner. What's that, And that means that you can decide what will be built in the coming sprints. And he looked at the list and he said, wait a minute, who has made this list? Yeah, that's the list of the project. Yeah, but that's from 1.5 years ago. And I know that the last 7 items they're not that very interesting. Okay, then just scratch them. And he did that, and I thought, okay, that's very fast. 5 minutes, we scratched 30% of the project, and then I asked the people if we would have built that, how much would it have cost? And it was $500,000. So I immediately told everybody, okay, we saved $500,000. It's not quite true, but we saved it. We saved it for other things. That's how we saved it, right? It was. I didn't have it in my hands. But
Yeah, it's freeing up capacity to do the true important.
Exactly.
Indeed, So in looking at the questions, I also think there is actually one that we already had on the list, and I'll go into that one. So it goes about cost allocation, right? Allocations of project, we also talked about that. I mean, we together, we had at Stata, we had an experience there. And so let's see, let's look up the question. So suppose your team develops, so this is Ton, develops software for several budget owners. How do you charge the cost of products delivered to various budget owners? So How did we do that allocation thingy?
Yeah. So what we did was actually very simple. It's you can see, for example, if you use a ticketing system like Jira or ServiceNow, you can see, okay, we work on this backlog item, and the backlog item is related to a larger backlog item, and the larger backlog item is related to initiative A. So therefore, and other stories are B and other C, you know. So at the end of the sprint, you can see, okay, I delivered 20 stories, 5 of those were for initiative A, so a quarter of the budget of the team should be allocated on that initiative. We had 10 stories for B, so half of the budget goes to B, and the rest goes to C. As simple as that. So the only thing you have to know, but you know with those systems, is how the work that's actually being delivered in a short iteration, how it is related to the larger initiatives, and you do know that in most cases. So then the allocation is very, so you don't have to measure hours, or you don't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be very precise. Just look at, okay, we had 20% of our results are for A, so 20% of the budget should be allocated to A. That's it.
Yeah, so that's essentially indeed what we did. So it was knowing because it's a relatively fixed cost structure. Actually, it does depend on the fact that your teams are relatively stable.
Absolutely.
Right? It does, because if people are moving in and out, and you have like teams that are actually like projects, and people are 5 projects at the same time. I mean, we've had that situation as well. But it all depends on like knowing your cost structure, so you know your burn rate essentially.
Exactly.
You know, we're spending, this team costs 20K per iteration, so you know you're burning 20K per 2 weeks, something like that. And indeed, the other part was, and that also comes down to, can we take each item on the list and can we kind of connect it to an initiative? Can we connect it to a project? Can we connect it to a budget owner, etc.? Right. What the advantage also was that I remember is that before that time, the team members themselves had to write hours. And it was on like task activities. So it was on doing business analysis, doing testing, etc. And you saw this really weird effect happening that people stopped testing because like the testing budget was done. It's like sort of made no sense because, well, it needed to be done, or business analysis, etc. So because there was like inside the team where there was these prefixed like activity budgets, little buckets, and if it just turned out that you needed more than you expected, sort of everything would just stop. So everybody was super happy with the fact that basically we took it one level higher. It doesn't really matter what needs to be done. Yes, you're a tester, but that just needs to be
and by the way, for the people that are concerned with is that precise enough? We actually correlated the new way of working with the old one, and it was, you know, within a margin of, let's say, 10%, it was exactly the same. So it was reliable. It was actually reliable.
Yeah, and in most cases, actually, it was more reliable because people stopped lying about it.
Yeah.
Because
and interesting, you didn't have the effect. What you said is that people feel when the budget is reached, right, and then they are really going to think, should I still do this work, or do I get, you know, am I going to be beat up because I spent more money on this task than was budgeted before? That's gone. So there's much more focus on, okay, we should deliver this and we will do it.
Yeah. And so it basically boils down dedicated capacity, known burn rate, and then somehow being able to if you look at the list of stuff that's been done, that you can sort of percent-wise say, hey, wait a minute, 50% of our items, or 50% of that basically capacity. And that does go into a bit of an assumption. Let's say you have 4 items, and you say, okay, now the base of this allocation, or even if you look in points or whatever, you say, okay, we see 25%. So we just simply assume that 25% of the capacity, you know, went to that team.
By the way, it's also connected to, you know, the definition of done. That's what it should be done, right? So if it's not done, then it's not fair. It's not the analogy is a little bit wrong, or at least it's off. You should finish things and then allocate. If you finished it half, you think it's finished half, but maybe you finished only 10% because there are problems in the second half. And so I think it's very important to really finish the stuff that you want to deliver and have it tested, and at least have it seen working on the, you know, in a test environment, or some system that looks like the production or the If it's physical, that people actually have used it or something like that. Because only then you know, okay, the work is really done, and then you can allocate. That's honest. That's fair.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Because we in our development we work with suppliers and with internal people, and with our suppliers they write every hour. Because they're going to invoices, so everything needs to be registered. With the internal people, it's different, and we have teams that work cross initiatives. We have teams that work, for example, on the wireframes of our product pages or landing pages. They are in different initiatives. Yeah. We don't monitor even how much they spend there or how much they spend there. We are only looking at this team had this plan. Did they deliver? Yeah. And if they delivered, so the definition of done, and that team that did the landing pages or the product pages spent 10% of their capacity on it, or 20% of the capacity on it, we don't even measure. The only thing what we do is that we see that, okay, we have so much initiatives. Can that team spend its time on that different initiative? And if they say yes, yeah, well, whether they do 10% there or 30% there, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. And actually, I don't want to know personally.
Yeah, but so this whole question indeed comes also under the assumption that that type of cost allocation and budgeting is sort of the game of the company anyway, right? So we've also indeed seen where that type of allocation of the cost of a team indeed is not even done anymore. But there are organizations that actually do this. Yeah. It's kind of like a high-level project-based, and then there's a budget connected to it.
And then actually, I would certainly do is do the allocation. Okay, how much time or capacity did we spend on support stuff? And how much time and money did we spend on new innovation stuff? Yeah. And if it's the support stuff, for example, comes from there are lots of questions, lots of complaints, incidents, those kinds of things. If you can bring that down, also visually, I don't know any director or any manager that wouldn't be happy with that. And by the way, if you bring it down, then literally because you have the fixed capacity, you don't have to spend so much capacity on the complaint stuff, what's sometimes called the failure demand. So because you have failures, you have to work. If you don't have the failures anymore, you have all the capacity available for doing interesting, new, innovative stuff. So that I think it's interesting. If you want to monitor something, then definitely monitor that.
Yeah, we split that out. So we work with value streams that are really for more for the strategic new initiative things, but we also have value streams that is really about maintaining our platform, improving our platform, getting the platform up to date, compliancy items, those quality items, those kind of things. So people will allocate their work towards those value streams. So we can see percentage-wise how much time we spend on new things and how much time we spend on maintaining.
Because you know how many people spend on the typical stuff.
Yeah. So there's some very good questions, and I'm really trying to kind of manage the time and seeing how we can get everything in. So a simple question or a small question, maybe a big answer, is like allocation on number of story points or number of stories. I think it was a bit of a reaction on your point where you say, oh yeah, you count the number of stories.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of discussion. Should you use story points or not? If you're able to, and if you do it well, then it's better. It's more precise. Not everything is the same size, but if you don't like that or don't understand it, or some people just don't like story points, so then just count stories. Okay, it's a little bit more coarse, but it also gives you a very good indication.
As long as stories are more fine. But I think maybe the best answer to give there is, as long as you can translate that into a percentage of the total velocity of the team, somehow say, oh, it's 20%, and sometimes you can do that. If you can do that with number of stories, that's fine. If you can do that with story points.
The simple rule that I use is that you need to have at least 5 stories in a sprint. Yeah. And that means something for the size of things.
Because the granularity is smaller and then the error is smaller.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that we try to bring in 2 different things for this measuring. I think velocity is really great for a product owner and his team, because then they can really plan the size of work what they are doing, so that in their iterative way of working they can control their workload. From a portfolio management perspective, I'm much more interested in their predictability. So we are really focusing on product owner. How predictable are you? If you have identified in your coming quarter that you want to deliver 10 features that together add customer value, are you delivering those? And whether the features started with a plan of 10 user stories and ended up with 15 user stories, for me it's not so interesting. What I want to know is a team so predictable that when they say, okay, for this quarter, this is the size of work that we are going to work upon and that we are actually going to deliver, this predictability, that is what we are more looking for.
That's also literally risk reducing, because it's predictability is less uncertainty, uncertainty is risk.
So, as far as another question, so Nina had a question here, so how do you estimate the budget when you want to start? How much do you ask? Is this also an estimation, and after a few iterations becomes more accurate?
That's actually the question that I ask Robert. How do you determine whether you need one team or 100 teams, right? So
but also what's the project size? How does that work? How do we go about it?
Very simple. Almost always, not if it's very new, you don't know, but and then definitely you don't know. So that's completely try it out. Start small, and then if you need more, then build it up over months. But normally okay, we are going to do this initiative. It is more or less the same as another that we did before. And just use the estimate for the thing that you did before. It will be approximately right. Is that precise? No, definitely not. But that doesn't matter that much, because we have people. So we say, let's say we use 10 teams of 100 people, and it turns out you need only 80 people. Then either you can slowly scale down, or there almost certainly are other things that you want to do as well. Give that work to the 20 people that are more or less free.
There's always more work.
Yeah, exactly. So and the other way, most of the time is the other way around. We think we need 100 people and we need 150 people, and then slowly build it up. So by we use sometimes the term splitting cells. So you have a team, add 2 persons to it. They get the way of working, the synergy, and then if you have a team of, let's say, 8 people, then split it up into 2 teams of 4. They have the same way of working. They have the knowledge. They know each other. If there are questions, add people to that, and then build it up. And I've actually done it a couple of times without going slower. I wouldn't say you're immediately going faster with more people, but at least you don't have a dip then.
Yeah, and again, always because it's a chosen size, what you're always sort of in control of how much that knob of how much money we're spending. Burn rate, you're really turning it up. But I think another thing to point out here is that, also based on the question, we normally sort of associate budget with allocation at the same time. I think what to me was also interesting in Agile is that budget is more like a forecast, right? And you're not immediately spending it. So there's this interesting effect where, sure, we've budgeted for $1 million, and normally you sort of get scared, we've just taken a $1 million risk. Whereas in Agile, you can just say, let's take that first part, see how it works, and it's now we're going to spend $50K to see if this will work. So there is a different risk profile here. You didn't just make you basically made a 50K decision to decide if you need a $1 million K decision. And that's what I've also seen. So here, if I look at Nina's question again, so how do you estimate the budget when you want to start? Well, essentially you're a scientific wild ass guess, right? You figure it out, you do your best estimate. But I think what the Agile thing is to then as quickly as possible do the things you need to validate that budget, to validate the forecast, and then as you get accurate, so how does it become more accurate? Well, by answering and doing the exact questions you need to figure out, like that million, is it safe enough to try now? How do we do it?
And interesting, so most of the time people think that you have to write down stuff on paper or do an Excel sheet or do something that is not building stuff. But I found out that in practice, if you, let's say, reserve 50K for analysis to determine whether it's interesting enough or not, you can spend that 50K not only on writing down numbers, but also, okay, let's build something.
Yeah.
And then see whether the ideas that we had, an architectural proof of concept or those kinds of things, the first prototype, or maybe even just paper sketches and try it out with clients, something like that. Build stuff. Let's actually look for working stuff.
It's actually maybe another way to put it. An MVP is fundamentally a financial risk control mechanism, because you're figuring out, here, let's try this. Like, are we going to spend another million on it or not? Like, and so you're de-risking your whole project.
Yeah. And strangely enough, that's what you mentioned before, that you can kill projects then. Yeah. And it's not failure, it's a good thing. Yeah. You are being in control then. You're killing projects because you know it's not interesting enough. Yeah. So
it's science. Falsifying hypotheses, indeed.
And this is I think the interesting thing, because that's the mind shift change. People are always like, oh, but if you stop it, then what are you going to do with that team? Exactly. You send them home? And I'm saying, no, we have them do something
so large backlog.
We have them do something better. Yeah. So that is also why it's important that you do have that backlog of ideas, but with your teams that are allocated to a specific part of your organization. You can use them. They can be flexible to work on A or on B or on C, but this is the challenge what I often see, and that is also what I see in portfolio management. This forward-looking vision, which puzzle pieces do we plan to do next year? Next year. Yeah. And if that is empty, you cannot say to a team, hey team, sorry, but this is not working, we unplug it. If you don't have that future vision, and this is for an organization really important to make sure that you put that in place. If you don't have that future vision, you cannot say, okay, we stopped this, we thought it was great, apparently it's not, but in our future vision we have this backlog. We take out something else. We wanted to do this next year, but actually we are going to do it now.
Yeah.
And
it's the better choice. Yeah.
And that is why I often see in companies they have problems with this, to stop something. Because they don't have something new.
Yeah.
So, given the time we have, I really try to we're going a bit back and forth, but I'm really trying to manage with our time. We still have about 13 minutes left. So here's an interesting one, which is we going back to the benefits discussion now. Yeah. So Femke says, in a government setting, the benefits are hardly financial. So early delivery doesn't make money immediately, only maybe cost of reduction. Actually, the benefits often lie outside your own organization and far in the future. So the market logic doesn't apply one-to-one. How to connect value delivery to financial investment value for money in a government setting, where it's more the benefit for the.
It's a little bit more abstract, and it is definitely true that you don't have to and don't. You cannot sometimes always translate things in terms of money, but you can talk about, okay, do we see the intended effects of what we wanted to do, at least a little bit, or if lagging indicators are concerned, so if you actually can see the benefits after a year or even later, then you have to have an hypothesis, and indeed it's not certain, but at least you have ideas about, okay, we are going to do this. It should have short-term effects on this, or we can see changes on this side of things. For example, let's see, if you want to lose weight, then you can measure how much calories you eat, right? The expectation is that if you lower the calories, then you will lose the weight over time. and you can weigh yourself and then see that. But the calories you can measure immediately. So you have to have, let's say, a theory about how things work, and measure the leading indicators, so the things that you can measure actually in a very short time scale, and then look at, okay, do we see the right things happening? And that might mean, okay, then we are on the right track, and you can still use the budget that you had, the forecasting budget, as you call it, to continue. So, and if you don't see them, then maybe the initiative can be slowed down, killed, changed, whatever.
But it's really interesting, because if we are doing this, you obviously always work with objectives and key results, and often these key results happen in the future. So to also connect then this key results with lagging and leading indicators is a second step. But I do agree with you, we don't use that too much, obviously, because in a lot of situations we are really focusing on the end result, like the losing weight. That is the end result. So this leading indicators is so much important that at the beginning you also define them, because there you can measure them.
Those are the steering parameters. If you don't have them, that's very difficult. It is very difficult to steer on, the end results, because that's the end, right?
And this is where the difficult part is. I think one of the things we've discovered is that we're actually, as a industry or in business in general, or in governments, we're not very good at sort of putting a number on the benefit, right? It's good. It's very esoteric sometimes. It's very hard to do. It's also like funny, like Laurens, a colleague, he told me a story that he doing also a training for project managers, and he asked everybody, like, who amongst here, like Prince 2 project management, did an actual real business case, and like an actual one. And then like 4 hands out of 100 people or so went up. And then he said, no, a real business case where you then could actually measure the benefits, that you could really figure it out. All hands went down. Right. So that kind of, he told me as a joke, and I really remembered it, because that actually is somewhat of an unknown, right? So one of the things I've also experienced is that because we're talking now about finance, right? But if we're talking about the benefits part, very often it's so esoteric, it's hard to measure. At least my experience is that at least if you can measure time, you can just put a stopwatch on, stop a stopwatch for something, or count things, and then figure out, okay, there's like you say, leading indicators that you can count or measure in some way, and then you have to agree with each other and say, okay, indeed, is there a correlation between what we can measure, and then say, if we trust and we agree with each other that if we measure this time to, or like you said, the calorie intake, etc., then we know that we'll have that benefit. I've often found that to be part of the financial, you could say, agreement or negotiation that you have. You also have to make that. On that note, also taking it back to the financial side, I've had very interesting discussions with controllers. Because one of the things that, for instance, was in a company, is that what I didn't expect and didn't know is that actually controllers have a lot of like numbers for things. So at some point it was like, but okay, within the company we're going to be saving for the business side. It's going to save them 2 hours that they normally would spend on this report, and it's going to save them 2 hours. And I was like, but how can we translate it? Because they just save 2 hours. Who cares? And then the controller told me, no, I actually have a number for you here. He said, we've made all the calculations, and basically every hour of that type of employee will net us 80 euros per hour. And I was like, oh, okay, so if we save 2,000, it's 80 times 2,000. We just have those numbers. So that's also an interesting one, is that surprisingly, so for me a big lesson is to kind of go to your controllers and say, do you actually have some like translation financial numbers where you can say, we measure this concrete thing, and then we put a financial number on it. And they think it's fun, by the way.
It works. And they really, you can have very sensible discussion with controls, but going back a little bit to the government side, so there you have, so the question was, I think, okay, we can't use, the market benefit of early income to fund the rest of the project, right? Because it works differently in the government, and that's true. But still, you can look at the non-financial numbers as well, and you have to agree with your partners also in the government side. So there's a lot of work to be done there, right? It's not easy to change that, but we should open a dialogue with the people that provide budget for governmental organizations, that you can actually change your direction based upon the value that you see, the leading indicators that we talked about. And that's not wrong, that's right, because you have to be able to change your direction because you know from some kind of facts that it is the better idea to do, and it's not losing budget, or it's not spending money uselessly. No, it's thinking about, okay, we will spend this money. How can we spend it in the most useful way?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also valid for governmental organizations, I think.
Yeah, and actually, in many cases, I actually just simply stay away from financial numbers, because it's what you often see is that there is also in connecting these goals, just having the sense of, oh, this is going to maybe improve or decrease the level of people who are drug addicted in the country.
Yeah.
And then again, that correlation, and then it's really like, does this initiative we think help more or less compared to another one?
Exactly.
Because that's another point to make, right? If you have a backlog of items, you don't need the absolute numbers.
Yeah.
You just need to be able to weigh two initiatives against each other.
Yeah.
And very often there is even an intuitive sense of what makes more sense, and then you just go for that one, knowing we don't know the exact number, but we know out of all these initiatives we try, this one has the most value.
Yeah, and going back to the beginning, because we have fixed cost, we have simplified that side of the story. Therefore, this discussion is even more sensible, more rational than before, because then you had to include the cost as well in a different way.
Indeed. So. For all those, I've really been trying to kind of get through everything, but those of you who have seen these sessions before, we take the whole question list, and then afterwards, all of us, we answer everything, and then we send it out to everybody who is attending here, so your question will get answered. But like in about 4 minutes we still have, I do want, and Ronald had the very first question at the beginning, and I was really worried that it was going to derail, but let's tackle this one. So, cost teams are known, but not for external spend. Interesting one. How do you deal with the financial investments in things like hardware? In an IT operations environment, they go hand in hand with scope for teams. So, indeed, good point. So, yeah, we're basically everything we've been talking about is spent on, the direct spend of the teams that are doing the work. But procurement and suppliers and all that stuff, how does that work? Is it any different? Do we do any new stuff? How does it work?
Yeah, so I don't know for sure whether we talked about it before, but there's a new initiative which is called Lean Agile Procurement, and it's a way of it's an agile way of thinking in the procurement world, and definitely. So if it's simple, then you just calculate how much cost you have, and then use those costs, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, okay, you don't know the external costs. It will be tricky. It will need negotiations, etc. And to make the story very short, the Lean Agile Procurement very much emphasizes collaboration with your partners, and so that you know with your partners what are the goals we want to achieve, what should we focus on, etc., etc. It will not give you, the exact forecast or the exact, right calculations up front, because you don't know. And so that's something that some people don't like to hear, and I wouldn't like to hear that. But some things you don't know. There are uncertainties. It's better to be able to respond to uncertainties than to ignore them. And so in Lean Agile Procurement, it's very much, okay, we will do in very short iterations, we will work with our external suppliers if we need to procure something. Then, because we work very closely together, we have the trust, we have the confidence that we won't spend too much money on it, because they are partners, and also we will get value for money. So we get a quality product, a quality physical thing that we definitely will need, and because you have the intense collaboration, you at least have the indication. Let's say you need a building. the people that will build or supply the building, they know their stuff. Hopefully, that's how you choose them. So if there is confidence, trust between the parties, then and the external party says, well, it's a large building, it will be 100 million. Maybe it's 80 million, maybe it's 200 million. That's a lot more, 200 million.
Yeah,
but it's you will know. It will be a lot of money, and because you are partnering, you can. So for a very large building, there are you have knobs to turn, and so how exactly will the building be built? What exactly are the features of the building? There are. You can spend more or less.
So you tie them in. Essentially, I think one of the things that we've also learned, and also my experience, like when I do the big for the new biofuel refinery at Shell, to really pull in essentially your suppliers into your teams, sort of like as close as you can get them, and have them learn with you, so they can then give you the better numbers. So
and I think
as a final one for you, Robert, what's your view on this one?
Well, I like this example, and I think that this is in the way that you need to change your work in procurement, for example. So, with your partners, you are not going to discuss the type of windows that you are putting in your building. You are going to talk with them. Listen, in this building, this is we want zero emission. Yeah. I don't care how you do that for me.
Or the lighting level or something like that.
Or I don't want to spend more than this much amount on heating the building. I don't care how you do that. So you need to approach this differently, and we used to go through this whole list of stuff where we actually implemented everything. This is the type of window that we will get. That's amount of windows that we will be in. This floor has this much windows. That floor will have that much windows. No, you need to change your view when you're working with your partners. You need to set your priorities in a different way. So and that is the change. And then you can say, okay, for this budget of 100 million, this is what we want. Zero emission, that much energy investment, that much light in every floor, etc., etc.
And please work with us for getting the best result for the 100 million.
Exactly.
So, gentlemen, we are just a bit 1 minute over time, so we have to stop. As always, it's just so much we can cram into 1 hour.
The 1 hour is so short.
It's so short. Maybe we should just do a version 2 of this topic and just keep going.
Yeah.
So to everybody who's been here, thank you very much. It was, again, as always, super fun to do this. We always enjoy talking with each other and having an audience for that and having your questions. Like I said, everything will be answered. We will do our best to do so. There was a question if it's recorded. Yes, indeed, it's recorded. So
on YouTube soon.
Yeah, so you can watch it later. Having said that, we really have to sign off for everybody because everybody has their meetings. So thank you very much again for this webinar. And then we're signing off again and see you for the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.